You are most welcome to our lesson number 16 on our series of studies on the book of Daniel and Revelation. We continue with the story of Daniel. This time we find Daniel in the lion's den. So we're looking at Daniel chapter 6. The central event of this chapter 6, is that of the aged prophet being cast into the den of lions. From his youth to his advanced years, Daniel has always been faithful to God and to his responsibility in his life of exile. Everyone who knew him to be a man of sterling integrity, who could not be moved by anything from a course he regarded right. This is Daniel. In his custom of praying 3 times each day, his enemies thought they saw the means of bringing about his downfall. They were wrong, as we shall prove soon. That what they did succeed in doing was to reveal their own duplicity and to bring ruin upon themselves. Every true child of God may see in this experience another evidence of God's regard of his own, and another telling reason to be true to right, whatever the cost may be. So let's start off with verse 1, Daniel chapter 6. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give account unto them, and the king should have no damage. If you remember, in our previous lesson, we left off when the kingdom of Babylon has fallen, and now we've got a new kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. And so Daniel, by God's grace, still has the privilege to be in top leadership in the government of a new kingdom that now takes over the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians. When Darius the Median took the throne formerly occupied by the Babylonian rulers, he at once proceeded to reorganize his government. He set over the kingdom 120 princes, and over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel, as we have read, was the first, and that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. This actually by default caused problems, in that they were jealousy of him. They were jealous of him. Let's look at verse 3. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. I'm actually repeating myself, but for a good reason, because we are emphasizing the fact that this new king, this new kingdom, still prefers Daniel to be in top leadership because of one thing and one thing only: an excellent spirit was in him. And whose spirit is that? It is the Spirit of God. Daniel was preferred above the president and the princes because of the spirit. Fallen angels, by the way, feared that his influence would weaken their control over the rulers of the kingdom, for Daniel was high in command. Of the 3 presidents that the king Darius put, Daniel was the first in line. In other words, he was second in command to the king himself. The accusing host of evil angels stirred up the presidents and princes to envy and jealousy, and they watched Daniel closely to find some occasion against him, that they might report him to the king, but they failed. Then these agents of Satan sought to make his faithfulness to God the cause of his destruction. Evil angels laid out the plan for them, and these agents readily carried it into effect. Friends, only the faithfulness in the little things can the soul be trained to act with fidelity under the larger responsibilities. God brought Daniel and his fellows into connection with the great men of Babylon, that these heathen men might become acquainted with the principles of the true religion. In the midst of a nation of idolaters, Daniel was to represent the character of the true God. How did he become fitted for a position of so great trust and honor? It was his faithfulness in the little things that gave complexion to his whole life. He honored God in the smallest duties, and the Lord cooperated with him. To Daniel and his companions, God gave knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. You remember we read this in Daniel chapter 1, verse 17. That gives us an idea how Daniel came to be where we find him today. Look at verse 4. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could not find occasion nor fault. For as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Wow, this is amazing. This is integrity. They could not find any occasion or fault against him. There was nothing they could pinpoint or put a finger on and say, we can find this man here to be fault. Friends, the experience of Daniel as a statesman in the kingdoms of Babylon and the kingdom of Medo-Persia reveals the truth that a businessman is not necessarily a designing policyman, but that he may be a man instructed by God at every step. Daniel, the prime minister of the greatest earthly kingdoms, was at the same time a prophet of God, receiving the light of heavenly inspiration. A man of like passions as ourselves, by the way, the pen of inspiration, the word of God, it tells us that he was a man of like inspection, describes him as without fault. His business transactions, when subjected to the closest scrutiny of his enemies, were found to be without one flaw, no fault at all. He was an example of what every businessman may become when his heart is converted and consecrated, and when his motives are right in the sight of the living God. Strict compliance with the requirements of heaven brings temporal as well as spiritual blessings. Unwavering in his allegiance to God, unyielding in his mastery of self, Daniel, by his noble dignity and unsavoring integrity, while yet a young man, won the favor and tender love of the heathen officer in whose charge he had been placed. You remember Daniel 1 verse 9? The same characteristics marked his afterlife. He rose speedily to the position of prime minister of the kingdom of Babylon. Through the reign of successive monarchs, the downfall of the nation, the establishment of another world empire, such as were his wisdom and statesmanship, so perfect, his tact, his courtesy, his genuine goodness of heart, his fidelity to principle, that even his enemies were forced to the confession that they could find none occasion nor fault for as much as he was faithful. This is amazing. We look at Joseph. Joseph and Daniel proved themselves true to the principles of their early training, true to him whose representatives they were. These men, both in Egypt and in Babylon, the whole nation honored and in them a heathen people, and all the nations with which they were connected beheld an illustration of the goodness and beneficence of God, an illustration of the love of Christ. What a life work was that of these noble Hebrews. As they bade farewell to their childhood home, how little did they dream of their high destiny. Faithful and steadfast, they yielded themselves to the divine guiding so that through them God could fulfill his purpose. They didn't think much about themselves. At all times they thought of God. The same mighty truths that were revealed through these men, God desires to reveal through the youth and children of today. The history of Joseph and Daniel is an illustration of what he will do for those who yield themselves to him and with the whole heart seek to accomplish God's purpose. The greatest want, friends, of the world is the want of man. Men who will not be bought or sold. Men who in their inmost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fail to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle is to the pole. Men who will stand for the right through the heavens, though the heavens fall. That is the kind of men that God is looking for. When I say men, I mean in plural. That is both men and women, male and female included. But such a character is not the result of an accident. It is not due to special favors or endowments of providence. A noble character is the result of self-discipline, friends, of the subjection of the lower to the higher nature, the surrender of self for the service of love to God and man. This is the result of where this comes from. Verse 5. Then said these men, we shall not find occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. So they tracked it to where they could possibly find fault with him. It's anything that concerned his God. Daniel's position was not an enviable one, by the way. He stood at the head of dishonest, prevaricating, godless cabinet whose members watched him with keen, jealousy eyes to find flaw in his conduct. They kept spies on his track to see if they could not in this way find something against him. Satan suggested to these men a plan whereby they might get rid of Daniel, use his religion as a means of condemning him, the enemy said, as we have just read. The secret, friends, of Daniel's strength was found in his conscientious attention to what the world would call things of minor importance. What do I mean? He was found before God 3 times a day in prayer and thanksgiving, and he was equally steadfast in his attention to his duties to the king. It is this conscientious attention to what the world despises that makes a strong, symmetrical character. He was faithful to God in heaven, and he was also faithful here on earth to those that were in charge. Verse 6 and 7. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said unto him, King Darius, live forever. Verse 7. All the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, serve of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. What a trap. Thereupon these presidents and princes that are gathered, counseling together, devised a scheme whereby they hoped to accomplish the prophet's destruction. Their plan and their sole plan was to get rid of Daniel because he found favor in the eyes of King Darius. They determined to ask the king to sign a decree which they should prepare, forbidding any person in the realm to ask anything of God or man except of Darius the king for the space of 30 days. A violation of this decree should be punished by casting the offender into a den of lions. It's very simple and straightforward. They just wanted to get rid of Daniel. A scheme was now devised to accomplish to accomplish his destruction. His enemies assembled and came up with this trick to the king, which he did not see at the beginning. Daniel's history is a remarkable one. He carried out his faith and principles against great opposition. He was condemned to death because he would not abate one jot of his allegiance to God, even in the face of a king's decree. It might at this day be called over-righteousness to go, as was his wont, 3 times a day, and kneel before the open window for prayer, while he knew that prying eyes were observing him, and that his enemies were ready to accuse him of disloyalty to the king. But Daniel would not allow no earthly power to come in between him and his God, even with the prospect of death at the lion's den. And this was how dedicated Daniel was to his God. Verse 8. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which altereth not, or which changeth not. When the monarch Darius heard these words, he saw at once the snare that he had set for his faithful servant. He saw that it was not zeal for kingly glory and honor, but jealousy against Daniel that had led to the proposal for a royal decree. So displeased with himself for his part in the evil that had been wrought, he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver his friend the princes. Anticipating this effort on the part of the king, came to him with words, Know, O king, that the law of the Medes and the Persians is that no decree nor statute which the king establishes may be changed. The decree, though rashly made, was unalterable and must be carried into effect. Verse 9. Wherefore king signed the writing and the decree. The king knew nothing of the hatred of these men toward Daniel, and did not suspect that the decree would in any way injure him. Through flattery, they made the monarch believe it would be greatly to his honor to pass such an edict. So the king was actually tricked into signing this decree. Verse 10. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went, look at what it does. This is how amazing God is. He went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, that is his usual way of doing it, he knelt upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed, and gave thanks before his God as he did before. Friends, it may be difficult matter for men in high positions to pursue the path of undeviating integrity, where they shall receive praise or censure. Yet this is the only safe course. All the rewards which they might gain by selling their honor would be only as the breath from polluted lips, as dross to be consumed in the fire. Those who have moral courage to stand in opposition to the vices and errors of their fellow men, it may be of those whom the world honor, will receive hatred, insult, and abusive falsehood. They may be thrust down through their high position because they would not be bought or be sold. They could not be induced by bribes or threats, or stain their hands with iniquity. Everything on earth may seem to conspire against them, but God has set his seal upon his work. They may be regarded by their fellow men as weak, unmanly, unfit to hold office, but how differently does the Most High God regard them? Those who despise them are the really ignorant, while the storms of calumny and the reviling may pursue the man of integrity through life, and beat upon his grave, God has the well done prepared for them instead. Folly and iniquity will at best yield only a life of unrest and discontent, and at its close a thorny dying pillow. And how many, as they view their course of action and its results, are led to end with their own hands their disgraceful career. And beyond all this waits the judgment and the final irrevocable doom that cannot be changed. Let's look at verse 11 and 12. Then these men assembled, found Daniel praying. That was their trick, that was their plan, that was their trap. They found Daniel praying and making supplication before God. Then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree that every man shall ask a petition of any god or a man within of any god or man within 30 days, save thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Verse 13. Then answered they and said before the king, that Daniel, which is of the children of captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day. So these people actually took time to spy, to pry, and watch Daniel the whole day, how many times he did this. And he counted. He has done it the first time. He has done it the second time. He has done it the 3rd time. Friends, for an entire day, the princes watched Daniel. 3 times they saw him go into his chamber. 3 times they heard his voice lifted in earnest intercession to God. The next morning they laid their complaint before the king. Daniel, his most honored and faithful statement, had set a royal decree at defiance. Verse 14. Then the king, when he heard these words, was so displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. When the monarch heard these words, his eyes were at once opened to see the snare that had been set. Certainly he came to a realization. He was sorely displeased with himself for having passed such a decree, and labored till the going down of the sun to devise a plan by which Daniel might be saved. Verse 15. Then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, Know, O king, that the law of the Medes and the Persians is that no decree nor statute which is the king establishes may be changed. They are reminding that we have already signed. The deal is on. You can't change it. Verse 16. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions as per the decree. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, Thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. What faith from a king who was not a worshipper of the true God, which means Daniel had made a mark in his life. Too late, he understood the snare that had been laid for the destruction of his favorite servant. Sorely troubled, he tried in every way to rescue Daniel till the going down of the sun. But Daniel's accusers had managed the matter so well that there was no way of escape. Daniel was brought before the king and his princesses, the princesses, to answer the accusation brought against him. He had the opportunity to speak for himself, and he boldly acknowledged his belief in the living God, the maker of the heaven and the earth. He made a noble confession of faith, relating his experience from his first connection with the kingdom. In his perplexity and distress, Darius said to Daniel, I have done all I can to save you. I can do no more. Thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. He added as he bade him a sorrowful farewell. I see a flicker of faith in the words that are said by King Darius. Verse 17. And a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, and that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Verse 18. Then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. In other words, the king couldn't sleep. During that sleepless night, the king thought as he had never thought before. Early in the next morning, hoping and yet despairing, condemning himself and praying to him whom he began to recognize as the true God, Darius went to the lion's den and cried out. What did he say? Verse 19. Then the king arose early in the morning and went in haste unto the den of lions. Verse 20. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions? In his mind, he still believes in this God of Daniel, that he would have made a miracle. Verse 21. He was not disappointed. Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. Verse 22. My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, that they may not hurt me, for as much as before him innocence was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. Friends, my God has sent an angel and shut the lions' mouths. Those were the words. This is how God saved his own. I'm thinking and reflecting about the end of time, when a similar scenario will play out. When this world comes to an end, to an abrupt end, and the children of God, those who are faithful, will be called upon to worship the beast instead of the true living God. I'm assured from this story that God will stand for his own. He will not let them to be devoured or to be destroyed. Will the Lord forget his people in that trying hour? Did he forget faithful Noah when judgments were visited upon the antediluvian world? Did he forget Lot when the fire came down from heaven to consume the cities of the plain? Did he forget Joseph surrounded by the idolaters in Egypt? Did he forget Elijah when the oath of Jezebel threatened him with the fate of the prophets of Baal? Did he forget Jeremiah in the dark and dismal pit of his prison house? Did he forget the three worthies, the three Hebrew boys in the furnace, fiery furnace? Did he forget Daniel in the lion's den? Will he forget his own at the end of time when they are asked to worship another God and not him? Definitely not. You and I, we have an assurance to be faithful just as Daniel was faithful, to be faithful just as Joseph was faithful, to be faithful just as the many that I've mentioned were faithful. Verse 23 and 24. Then was the king exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. Verse 24. And the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, their wives, and the lions had the mastery of them, and broke their bones in pieces, or ever they came, before they even came to the bottom of the den. Verse 25. Then King Darius wrote unto all the peoples, the nations, and the languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. Verse 26. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. Now, this time around, the king makes a decree without the consent of anyone or people collaborating, bringing this suggestion or proposal to him. He, from the experience, from the testimony that he saw with his own eyes and experience, is convicted about the true living God, and makes a decree. Verse 27. He delivereth and rescueth, he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. And finally, verse 28. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Friends, the deliverance of Daniel from the den of lions had been used of God to create a favorable impression upon the mind of Cyrus the Great. The sterling quality of the man of God as a statesman of far-seeing ability led the Persian ruler to show him marked respect and to honor his judgment. And now, just at the time God had said he would cause his temple at Jerusalem to be rebuilt, he moved upon Cyrus as his agent to discern the prophecies concerning himself, with which Daniel was so familiar, and to grant the Jewish people their liberty. Interestingly, we touched this in the previous lesson, that the timing came just right, and another prophecy is being fulfilled, whereby the devil wanted to destroy the servant of God. He opens another window, which is now the release of, or the liberation of, the Jews who were waiting for another prophecy to be fulfilled. Friends, we better be trusting God, because he never disappoints. What a beautiful lesson, what a beautiful testimony of what God can do if we too can be faithful, just like Daniel. Trust him, and God will do wonders for you. God bless you.